So really what I'm going to be talking about is kind of that beyond sample tracking component and being able to manage laboratory processes or experiments within the sample manager tool. And we've heard this a lot kind of from a lot of the speakers today, but there is, pieces of evolution that happens when you start to manage your samples digitally. And there's sort of those core processes that we've talked about, the sample registration and storage, as well as kind of the auditing and lineage component, again, being able to, understand where the sample came from. But as labs sort of progress on this like digital data journey, they essentially start to think about ways that they can track other work within systems, and either within the same system or different systems. We've set up Sample Manager in a way that we hope that it allows for you to sort of start to expand within the same system, because that data centralization piece can be really core to sort of that efficiency of science and being able to answer questions really quickly. So we have sort of a variety of tools to do this within Sample Manager. One of them, Alex kind of mentioned early on, around sort of pick lists, being able to select samples to ship out or to perform work on or to perform an experiment on, is a really sort of fundamental concept around experiment management or process management. The assay feature is really designed for the integration of instrument or results data into samples and being able to track those more holistically as well. But I really want to focus on sort of workflow and our electronic lab notebook today, because I feel like this is the piece where we've got a lot of folks that come to us asking, why should I use workflow or why should I use ELN? What are sort of the differences between these? And so really, I'll share kind of why we designed these two features to begin with. And workflow was intended to track sort of these very structured, validated work processes on samples. So things like, I want to make a sample request, or I want to ship these samples and track that work, or here is a series of experiments that I need to do on a set of samples. And that's what sort of workflow was intended for. As I mentioned, it's very sort of structured and task oriented. So if you know exactly what those steps are and those aren't getting optimized or deviated from, workflow is a really great choice. We also have built in sort of a work assignment piece. So if I want to assign work to Andrew or to Lance or to Tori, I would be able to do that, and they would get a notification and it would sort of show up in their queue as work to be done within the system. And then finally, we also allow for locking templates and customizing fields on it. So really helping sort of with the overall data integrity and compliance piece. If you need to have a very strict workflow of things, the workflow tool is very useful for that. Alternatively, our ELN, or electronic lab notebook, that's sort of built in, and it's this data connected notebook, was built to replace sort of traditional laboratory notebooks. And as Doug mentioned, or coming from another ELN that's not centralized and not linked to your sample data, but effectively, it is kind of what it sounds like. It's a free form notebook. We do allow for a collaboration piece as well in terms of co-authorship. So again, sort of recognizing that nobody's doing science in a vacuum. And more often than not, you're probably working on an experiment together. This allows folks to collaborate and contribute to that notebook separately. And then finally, we also have sort of a review process that includes e-signatures that help support Part 11 compliance and other sort of regulated environments. So I have clients that are using one of these or each of these sort of separately. And then we also have clients that are using both of these together for sort of an ideal like experiment tracking system. And so my thought today was to maybe stay in the CAR T cell space. I came from a correlative lab, sort of collecting samples for CAR T-cell clinical trials. And I thought with Ty and Doug's presentation, it just made sense to kind of stay here today. I'm going to make a very sort of generalized example of what an experiment might look like, and then sort of walk through that within the system. So let's say that I've got these humanized mice that I am trying to test out sort of my developed CAR T cell within a mouse model. I am collecting blood then from these mice. I want to ultimately sort of understand what the expression of this CAR T cell is like within the system. I can do this in kind of a variety of ways, but for this experiment, again, very overgeneralized. I basically want to do this with qPCR and understanding sort of the vector copy numbers that we're getting, as well as the surface level expression through flow cytometry. So that's kind of the basic experiment that I want to model today. And I'm just going to hop in to the system now. I think I can do this. Like this. Great. And so if I wanted to track that within my system, what I really have is both a notebook kind of tracking all of that work, but then also a high level sort of workflow job that's describing each of these steps. So I'm going to go into my notebook to start. And right now, I've got Lance and Andrew and Bernie as sort of my co-authors for this. We're all sort of contributing this work together. I captured sort of an image of that experimental design. But I also have now sections of my notebook that indicate sort of those high level pieces of the experiment that I want to run. So what does that blood collection look like? I'm able to reference both sort of the workflow job that's capturing this work, as well as sort of the mice that I'm taking blood from, as well as then those samples that I'm collecting from those mice. All of these are sort of live links and listed in sort of my referenced items. I have a process for my DNA extraction as well as my qPCR. And then finally, and my flow cytometry. And then finally, I've got sort of copied and pasted from the internet, essentially at this point, is sort of final results on what this looked like. So this allows me to submit now when I'm done, and have that sort of formalized review process on my ELN. If we look at the workflow job, I'm just going to sort of go in there and open it. The way that I have modeled this is I have some information around this workflow job of who is ultimately sort of the owner or the driver of this experiment. I'm notifying Lance to let him know what's going on. I can also indicate sort of that priority level to help me help people prioritize their work within the lab. And then I've got some custom fields as well. And I've got a sort of list of the mice that I have within my system. I can see the different sort of raw data pieces of my assays that I have, as well as where I'm at in the process. So really, we've got sort of the blood collection, that was me, and I was meant to do this on Monday, and then flow, which was going to be Jason the next day, and DNA extraction, which is Bernie, and sort of finally Lance. So all of these things can now sort of happen and be collaborated on. And as each of these are getting completed, the team can go and reference sort of the pieces of what they've done within the ELN as well. So it really allows for kind of this structured email notification system to be able to guide and drive some of the work that we're capturing ultimately within that ELN. I'm just going to make sure I'm peering at sort of Q&A and chat here. Feel free to interrupt me with any questions that you have. What I'd like to actually do is go in and sort of walk through how I did this, right? So it's much easier to see sort of the final product and be like, oh, it's great. It's actually quite easy to sort of formulate these within Sample Manager. So if I go back to my menu and I go to my notebooks homepage, I can create a new notebook and choose a template. So we'll say, let's see, Thursday. And the template that I've already created is sort of has the bones of the experiment that I want to capture. So I'm going to choose that template. I can add co-authors now or later. We'll say Lance and I are going to do this work together, and maybe, you know, we'll aim for finishing it next Friday. And now when I've created this notebook, I really have kind of that structure or those bones that we were referring to. And so we can start to use this as a mechanism to standardize work within our lab and make sure that things are being done in the way that we want them to be done. If I wanted to create a new notebook or a new template, I could sort of edit this and then save this as a new template. Or if I was really starting from scratch, I'm going to go into the manage option and choose templates and create a new template. And let's say that I want to track now maybe a different procedure or something like that. So we'll say, you know, demo experiment, and I can have a description. And now I really have kind of like an empty document as you would for like a word processor or something like that. I can really sort of extend this as much as I want. I can add new entries. I can insert sort of formatting and tables, even attachments if there was like a standard SOP or something that I wanted to be tracked, or maybe sort of an example template of what does this file look like to sort of feed into an instrument. All of those things can kind of be attached at that template level. And then of course, once you're starting the experiment, those can be sort of altered and deviated from as needed and as captured. Look and take a quick minute. And so to create the workflow component, it's a very similar process. I'm going into sort of the menu and choosing my workflow templates. I can create a new template here. And if we sort of say demo experiment for this, perhaps, now I can really sort of work on these in tandem and get kind of those high level assignments that I want. I can create some new fields. So maybe this is me capturing sort of a kit number or a lot number for the experiment that I'm about to do. Again, I can add kind of my SOP or the manufacturer's SOP for a given experiment. I can also create these tasks. So if I wanted to do another sort of blood collection, I could have that again. Nice. And then maybe this time we're doing sort of a plasma extraction and then maybe some cytokine analysis or something like that. So I would be able to add these, and if I had sort of a cytokine assay readily available, I would be able to link that here. One of the components I talked about earlier this morning was sort of allowing the edit of assays in a job, and so I could really select multiple assays here and instantiate a job, but then allow Lance, who might be doing the work, to cross some of these out and be like, hey, we don't have enough cells to perform intracellular cytokine staining via flow on this. So we're gonna, you know, skip it or do something else. So really allowing for that ultimate flexibility and kind of control of what's happening in the lab. So once I finish creating that template, I can create a job from it, either kind of directly from the template, or what I think happens more frequently is a selection of samples in some way, right? So maybe here I'm just selecting a couple new samples, and at this point, I'll start a new job and choose that new template and say, okay, here I'm going to do, you know, this demo experiment. We're going to call it sort of the user conference. I'll be the owner and I'll let Andrew know what's happening. I can fill out this information now or later, but now I've got kind of that job encompassed with my samples, where those samples are part of this. The assays, once the assay results will be uploaded, will be there as well. And if I go into my notebook, I can now also make reference to that workflow job as well. So that allows me to kind of have the that's the notebook, there we go. That allows me to have kind of the full uh experiment sort of captured within my system, and then that ability to be tracked. I think I'm going to stop there for today. If you guys have questions on this, oh yeah, it looks like there's one. So uploading assay results, it's pretty easy actually. So if I have assay results, I can import them. Most commonly, folks are doing this via file, right? You've got sort of some assay data file sitting on your computer, and so that allows you to upload it here and attach it directly to samples. In a demo, I always like to do sort of entering data in a grid, because it allows you to kind of see what's going on. And so I can copy and paste or sort of manually fill this out as well. And that process then essentially, once we'll call it sort of my demo gene, and we'll leave sort of the VCN blank. But this process then, once I've imported, I can go in and look at that blood sample as well. And now I've got that assay data kind of connected to that blood sample. Any other questions before I wrap up today? Okay. I am going to switch back over and really kind of give a final thank you to everyone who presented today, as well as everybody who showed up. And if you stayed for the almost full 3 hours, thanks so much for sharing your Thursday with us. One last question. Yes, all of what I showed today is part of Sample Manager Professional. And so if that's of interest to you, definitely get in contact with Jason or Lance if you're kind of at that starter level instead. Okay, thank you everyone so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.